My number 5 is Mike Tyson. A fantastic fighter in his prime. Unfortunately, his prime wasn't a long prime. It was between about 1985 to about 89, 90. But he was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's easy to say that the division that he cleaned up perhaps wasn't the strongest, but he was such a dominant fighter and wiped the floor with everybody. It's easy to underestimate the guys he beat. You know, the Trevor Burbicks, the Tony Tuckers, the Bone Crusher Smiths, Pinkland Thomas, Tony Tubbs, Larry Holmes came back to fight him. Michael Spinks, okay, he was a blown up light heavyweight, but he had beaten the reigning champion Larry Holmes over 2 fights. All the other guys that were around at that particular time, Tyrell Biggs, Frank Bruno, Carl the Truth Williams. Mike Tyson had been brought up to fight by Customato and other people in the Customato camp, Teddy Atlas, and then on to Kevin Rooney, and they taught him to box to his full advantages. He was 5'11½", which is not very, very tall for a heavyweight. He was very powerfully built. And they taught him to duck and move his head, keep his hands up near his chin. And at his best, in the 80s, not only was he a fantastic hitter, and he had a good chin in those days as well, but he was elusive. He wasn't easy to hit either. They were saying he was invincible, so maybe he started to believe his own hype. But after Kevin Rooney, there was no one to continue to teach him how to improve on that style that had become so successful and was taught to him by the Customato team. And he started to, at best, stand still and at worst decline. And eventually, as we know, in 1990, Buster Douglas turned up with his A game, to say the least, fought a superb fight and ended the indestructible myth of Mike Tyson. But he was a fantastic fighter, there's no doubt about that. We have to remember him as he was then, not the guy in later years who lost to Kevin McBride and Danny Williams of the UK. But a very, very, very good fighter. For me, Mike Tyson, number 5. My number 4 is Joe Frazier. A very, very good heavyweight champion of the world. Won the championship from Jimmy Ellis, who had won the title himself in an elimination tournament. Then Muhammad Ali comes back from a 3-year layoff, challenges Joe Frazier, and it's billed as the fight of the century. 2 undefeated heavyweights going head to head. And yes, Ali had been out for 3 years. He had 2 fights, got the shot at the championship against Frazier, and Muhammad Ali was very, very good in that fight as well. He was good on his feet. He did have fast hands, but Frazier was on top of his game. And Frazier's sheer fantastic stamina, determination, punching power, knocking Muhammad Ali down in the 15th round, and Joe Frazier wins the points decision. I mean, that was Frazier's best performance and the best day of his whole fight career. Eventually going on to lose to George Foreman in pretty devastating fashion, it's got to be said. He went on to 2 more fights with Ali. The Super Fight 2 in Madison Square Garden, I believe that was in '73. Ali wins the points decision there. And then the famous Thriller in Manila, an absolutely unbelievable slugfest in boiling hot heat in Manila. The fight was almost neck and neck, maybe Ali slightly ahead going into the 15th round, and Joe Frazier's trainer Eddie Futch decided he was not going to let Joe Frazier go out for the 15th round. Joe Frazier's, one of his eyes was completely closed and the other one was half closed. Both guys were utterly exhausted, so probably a good decision by Eddie Futch, but again, a fantastic performance by Joe Frazier. Not an easy man to beat at all, so he is up there. He is number 4 on my list. Number 3 on my list is Lennox Lewis. Again, a fantastic record, 44 fights, 41 victories, only 2 defeats and 1 draw. The 2 defeats that he did have against Oliver McCall and Hasim Rahman where yes, he was knocked flat on his back by both of those guys, but he did avenge both of those fights. So he went into his retirement with only 2 defeats, which he avenged. Heavyweight champion of the world 3 times. Fought some good guys on his way up. When he became champion, he didn't duck anybody. He fought all the guys that were there. 6'5", 250 pounds. Despite those 2 losses, he did have a decent chin. A hard puncher. For me, I'd have him ahead of the likes of Frazier, Joe Lewis and Tyson, just because of his sheer size, and he knew how to use it as well. He had a fantastic jab, knew how to keep fighters at long range. So yeah, only 2 guys ahead of Lennox Lewis for me. That's the only way I could see it. So number 3 for me, Britain's Lennox Lewis. Number 2 on my list is the Eastern Assassin Larry Holmes. An excellent record of 75 fights and 69 victories. Only 6 defeats, several of those when he was boxing in his later career, well into his 40s, against guys who would not have beaten him in his prime. But an excellent champion, held the heavyweight championship of the world from 1978 to 1985. Won the fight in 78 against Ken Norton in an absolutely fantastic fight. Going off into an early lead, Norton gets back at him, and according to the scorecards, going into the 15th round, they were neck and neck, and Larry Holmes takes that round on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards, so razor thin. He wins the heavyweight championship of the world against Ken Norton, a very good heavyweight himself, who could have given most of the guys on my list a very good fight on his best occasions, but he did have his bad nights as well. That's why he's not on my list. Eventually losing the title to Michael Spinks in 2 very controversial fights, 2 close fights. For me, the first fight against Spinks, it could have gone either way. The second fight against Spinks, I thought Holmes won. Spinks did claw some back in the later rounds, but I thought Holmes had a big enough lead early on and took a few of the rounds in the middle as well. And I thought he did do enough to win that second fight, but he didn't get the decision. Came back to fight Mike Tyson, who was very much in his prime. Lost in 4 rounds against Mike Tyson, but he came again. He had quite a good second career in his 40s. Beat Ray Mercer, who was an Olympic heavyweight gold medalist from 1988. Got a shot at Holyfield and was actually doing very well early on, but Holyfield worked out his rope-a-dope style and got Holmes into the centre of the ring and picked him off a bit from there. Was unfortunate. Well, I say unfortunate. He lost narrowly against Oliver McCall. I thought that was a neck-and-neck fight after 10 rounds, but Oliver McCall, I think, did put pressure on him in the last couple of rounds, and it was probably the right decision. But I was rooting for Holmes. He was a sentimental favourite for me. But an excellent fighter, a superb jab, very good boxer, decent power, not devastating knockout power. He was a wear-and-down fighter. But for me, in his prime, which goes from the mid-70s to the mid-80s, very hard to beat. So for me, number 2 on my list.